Hello and welcome, everyone. It's lovely to see you all for another Saturday. I'm joining you from Cyprus today. I'm going to see if I can get a view out of the window. I expect it to be oversaturated and not work, but hopefully, ooh, too much curtain. Yeah, is that going to work? You see? Anyway, no, that doesn't work. Anyway, I'm having a lovely time in Cyprus by the sea. I'll have to send some photographs around later. But hopefully the internet is going to hold out for me today. If not, I'm joined by my colleague Sulema, who will be looking after everyone. Please do introduce yourself.
Hi guys, I don't know why my camera is not working at the moment, but I'm Sulema. I'm one of the admissions consultants here at UniAdmissions. So I speak to students and parents about kind of the interview process, and I offer some advice as well. And then if they were interested in our programs, I talk to them a little bit about how we can help them moving forward.
Thank you. Hopefully the video will start working for you in a moment. I've pressed a couple of buttons, but who knows if they'll have the desired impact.
There we go.
Oh, that's positive. Oh, wonderful. Do you have as good a view out of your window?
No, it's absolutely dreadful here right now. So
that's bad news. I'm coming back on Monday, but until now I have a view, a clear blue sky and a view of the Mediterranean Sea out of my window. So I'll enjoy it while it lasts.
Oh, absolutely jealous.
If there's any comfort, it was very expensive.
I can imagine.
So we're going to be talking a little bit today about interviews at Oxford and Cambridge. Next week, we're going to be switching focus to think about medical interviews. My understanding is a lot of people have, if not all, have had their invitations for interview now. Please do let us know through Q&A chat and things like that. We can be best informed of what you're up to. But we're really keen to be able to do a little bit to help out today and to let you know a little bit more about the kinds of help that we at UniAdmissions can provide as we sort of close in on the vital moments. As I said, next week we'll talk about MMIs, which are relevant if you're applying for medicine. I'm going to be talking sort of in three broad themes. The first thing is we're talking a little about what the interview is like. We're going to be talking a little bit about the criteria that are used to assess the interview. And we're also going to be talking, and I'm not sure I've actually got an explicit slide on this. We're going to be talking a little bit about how to cope with having to do the interview on Zoom or Teams or whatever platform it is they've chosen this year. Mm-hmm. So giving everyone a little bit of a taste of a few of the tricks of the trade that we've been using to make that whole experience slightly less painful. Obviously, number one I recommend among them is doing it from a holiday resort in lovely weather. But if you're too late to book that, then we'll see if there's something else we can figure out for you. So what are the interviews like? So, well, I expect this is something that you've spoken to students about already, Sulema. The sort of the misconceptions people have about the interviews, right?
Yeah, I mean, people kind of go in, everyone has their own ideas, and it's really good to kind of speak to students who don't really know. It's great to kind of go in from scratch. But yeah, there are very different areas and different ways to do them.
Yeah, I say there are all sorts of ideas that circulate about what interviews are going to be like. Mm-hmm. I think people expect them to be very frightening. It's a kind of an intimidating atmosphere to go into, particularly as in the old days if you're going there in person. But because of the sort of the scale of the operation, thousands of interviews going on each day, the universities really do these things in quite a strict, structured sort of way. Mm-hmm. There will be at least 2, often 3 people interviewing you. And that's largely to make sure that you have a little bit of a conversation, but also to make sure that the whole process is really fair. Mm-hmm. That way I can't decide that I like you and let you off easily. Sulema can't do the same thing, even if we've coordinated. It's about making sure that you get a fair impression of things. And that's hugely important. It also means that that these assessments are being recorded and looked at throughout the day during the interviews. So if you're at the beginning of the day, you're not going to be compared just against some kind of abstract standard of what's good. Your score might go up or down depending on how people do in the rest of the day. There'll be little adjustments and tweaks made like that to make sure that everyone's being compared fairly. You might seem to be good but not great at the beginning of the day, and then it turns out the people who follow you aren't as good as you, and all of a sudden you sort of rise in estimation. And the other thing to think about is people will often hear, and newspapers love to publish these stories, these exaggerated stories of the kinds of questions that one gets asked in these interviews. There'll be something completely mad, but it doesn't really happen. If you get asked a strange question, it will be in the context of a larger conversation where they're trying to sort of tease out what kind of knowledge you have. So, no one's going to come in and, off nothing ask you to tell them about a banana or to tell you how much water there is in a cow. That would only ever come up as a kind of conclusion of a kind of set of questions to force you to reason in new and exciting ways. Now, chances are you're going to have interviews at least two interviews, and possibly even a third at college. This is more commonplace at Oxford, where students are more likely to be interviewed by more than one college. But as we said, each time it's going to be at least two people. It's not going to be you and some scary elderly academic in a room on your own. It is going to be you and a couple of other people. And the thing to remember here is, even if the interview feels horrible while you're doing it, if it's frightening, if you feel like you're making a fool of yourself, try not to worry too much. It's supposed to be difficult. If they think they've found the edge of your abilities, then they may not press further. But if they're really pushing, that shows that they think you're capable of more, which is a good sign. So what are they looking for in particular? So what I've got here are some of the explicit criteria that are drawn from the book, the set of regulations that Oxford published for PPE. And they talk about sort of these three areas that they're interested in: students who have what they call application. That is to say, people who are really committed to, really interested in the kinds of problems that they're tackling in an interview, people who really put time and energy into it, people who are committed. It's another word for passion, almost, not being put off too quickly. The second thing is the sort of the reasoning ability, being able to actually go through the motions of figuring out what parts of an argument make sense, what parts don't. If you find yourself arguing something silly, if the information you're given changes, making sure that you can get out of that. But having the kind of, not just the enthusiasm for tackling the problem, but also having the skills to actually do it. And then, of course, that communication skill, because it's all very good to be very passionate, to be very skilled, but if you can't convey that information to another person, if you think of some of the students who are applying for perhaps computer science or maths or chemistry, or whatever it might be, if you can do it on paper, but you cannot explain face-to-face to someone what you've done, that's going to be a problem for you in the interview, and is something that we really encourage our students to work on, because this is the big difference from your conventional exam format, where in normal circumstances you might be able to get away with being able to write a wonderful essay or a wonderful problem answer, but not be able to explain it in words afterwards. Whereas for this format, that is really important. Do you find that the students we speak to are sort of surprised by these criteria, Salema, or
Yeah, I think a lot of students that I speak to, at least, just they find that you'd go in and it would be like an interview for a job or something. I mean, it can be, but they want to know what you know, but also, like you said, the communication and the way that you convey is what they want to witness a lot more as well.
Yeah, because we're, and I think this is something I'm going to talk about a little bit more about later, but because we're talking about university, a place of learning, what you know is obviously great, but it's about the aptitude for more learning that's important. If you already knew it all, it would be very strange to bother to go to university at all, because what would you learn there?
Exactly. Yeah, you
and
go
that's
to
definitely
learn, not to teach.
Yes, and that's I think that may even be what I've got coming up one of the later slides. But that is an experience I have with a lot of students I've spoken to who will come in with a lot of confidence, a lot of maybe a little bit of arrogance.
Yeah,
and that will cause problems for them.
Yeah.
So if we think about the skills we're thinking about in this interview context, obviously you've got the hard skills around reasoning that we've been talking about, but it's also about these soft skills, whether that is, these are the kinds of skills that have to do with connection. You're going to be presented with perhaps weird or new problems to tackle in the interview. And so it's not just your ability to do the equations or to make the analysis. It's about being able to draw together different pieces of information, new information, whether that's information about people and situations, or whether that's contextual information, whether it's employing tools you already have in unexpected ways. There's a famous story about a German university student, for example, who was asked in his interview how much water there is in all of the seas, and he tells them. And the professors at the university are very confused and ask him how he knew the answer. And he says, well, it's very simple. All you have to do now is to stop all rivers and go and check. That may not be the kind of answer that you want to give in your interview.
No.
But it's important. But it does get to the first step of how you would begin to answer that question, which is to say, right, is the amount of water in all of the seas, is that an amount of water that's changing? Would be a very good place to start. I hear it's getting more. This is something to do with climate change, apparently. I don't know if this was the case in the age of the German student I'm thinking of, but it's those kinds of things you want to be starting from, not just looking at the sort of the mathematical processes you need to go through, but understanding the ways, the ideas that you're looking at interact. And again, you've got to be making sure that you can communicate that in a way that allows you to adapt to new pieces of information, to new problems, that you're communicating that well with the people you're talking to. And most importantly, that you're doing that empathically. This is something we're going to talk a little bit in a moment, but the most important part of the interview experience is making sure that they want to see you again. And in some respect, like going on a first date, I think. It's not just a commitment to thinking that you're smart on the part of the university and the interviewers. It's also whether they want to spend time working with you in the years to come. And if you come across as unpleasant to spend time with, that's not going to go in your favor. It's smart, want to be who it's pleasant to spend time with, and that can be that's a trick people often miss, is my experience. I'm sure all of the students we work with are absolutely coming in any case, but I don't know if have you had any experiences of students who perhaps you wouldn't be as keen to spend an hour every week with recently?
I mean, yeah, I think you come in and knowledge is obviously a really important factor, but then it is, like you said, the likability as well. And some people do tend to miss that. But yeah, I agree.
Exactly. It's about having the right balance of communication skills, that kind of conceptual curiousness. There are certain straightforward things you can do right, but I would say if you're worried about that side of your presentation, look at what you might see in a dating guide. Look at the kinds of things you want to be saying to another person for them to be not necessarily interested in spending their life with you, but at the very least spending, going on a second date.
Yeah, exactly.
And the thing to think about here is the way that you're presenting your information, the way you're working through things. This interview is going to be some occasion on which you find yourself very much in your own head, I expect. You're going to be very worried. It's going to be stressful. You're going to be thinking, oh God, have I said the right thing? A lot. Take the time to think about how your own thought processes work. This is something to do in advance of the interview, particularly because it's unlikely you have time to change your personal thought processes at this stage. But think about how you're approaching the information. How are you integrating your ideas into what you've already been thinking? How are you presenting your ideas? All of these things are going to be really helpful in terms of making sure you are sort of putting your best foot forward. And what I've done now is I've pulled out a few example interview questions. I don't know, would you prefer to be interviewed or to interview?
But me, I don't mind interviewing.
Go on then. We'll ping it. We'll pop over to some questions, and you can interview me a little bit. So let's see. Unfortunately, I knew what these questions were in advance because I wrote the slides. But I'll still give it a go.
Okay. All right then. Can violent protest? Sorry. Okay. Can violent protests ever be justified?
So the first thing to think about this question is it's clearly a provocative question. A lot of students will come into these interviews with strong opinions, often strong political opinions, which I think is what this is talking about. And so you want to start off by making sure that you're not just going to become too interested in your own personal views. Probably if you were faced with this question, you have an instinctive answer, but be careful to think about whether it's going to be an answer that you can stand up in a discussion or whether it's the most interesting answer to talk about. So the things I will be looking at here. So I will be asking the first question. I'll be wondering what is violence here. So we're talking about violent protest. Are we talking about the real one far end of violence? Are we talking about burning down a building filled with children? Are we talking about saying rude words to people? Are we talking about violent language? Are we talking about smashing? Are we talking about destroying private property? Are we talking about injuring people? What kind of violence are we looking at? Because that's going to inform what kind of justifications might be okay. If we're going to think about, I don't know, pulling a statue down, then you might say that, oh, you justify pulling down a statue, but the level of justification you need would be much lower than you would need for some kind of violence against other people. So you want to think about how the sort of the scales you're working with. And the last thing on this one I would think about is, justified, to. Are you justifying it to God? Is this some kind of abstract sort of perfect moral authority you're appealing to? Are you trying to justify it to people who are part of your cause, who agree with you? That would be fairly easy, perhaps. Are you trying to justify it to some kind of legal afterwards? Are you imagining some kind of trial, or are you just trying to appeal to some broad sense of morality? Because you've got a lot of different things to weigh here, and I think that's how I would hope someone would approach the question, which is to try and, because you've got a lot of difficult things are a little unclear in that question, which I think makes a really challenging one to answer, and one where it's probably more interesting actually to talk about views other than your own, rather than to look at your own things, because those might turn out to be less interesting than perhaps take the other side of the coin. If you love violent protests, say that they can never be justified. Maybe try out some ideas a little bit. You can still have a little bit of fun in the interview, I think.
Yeah, I think with questions like that, it's very important to be as unbiased as possible. You'll probably be speaking to someone who may not even share the same opinions as yourself. So kind of being able to, like you said, speak about both sides of the coins would look really good on your side.
Yeah, and as I say, the most effective way to do that is to begin by really thinking about what the ideas you're working with mean, rather than rushing into some kind of emotive example. I mean, this is particularly interesting because for a long time since I went to university, I was at university, having a big protest was a very important part of university life. We were always protesting things. And I don't think those protests ever got particularly violent, but I remember when a group of students attacked the Conservative Party headquarters at Millbank Tower and smashed things up.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that was very much the thing. What, 12 years ago, I think that was. So this is one of those things that comes out of fashion as well. It may be that when you yourself are at university, perhaps doing a big protest will be the thing.
Yeah, definitely,
I've not
especially in the last
ages,
year.
but absolutely. Is there a difference between, what are the nuances between a protest in favor of Black Lives Matter, or a protest in favor of, Sarah Everard or other women killed by the police? What is the differences between that and, that protest I was thinking about 12 years ago? That was a protest about changing the price of university. Controversially, I think that the lives of Black people are more important than the price of university. But the level of enthusiasm that goes into these things is really interesting, and is a way of thinking about again, what kinds of protests are justifiable, what kinds of violence might be legitimate. There's a lot to look at. So I'm not going to try and answer the question about the periodic table because I have not done chemistry since 2004. So I guess my answer is I would make it much better, such that I would have wanted to study chemistry. Do you have any views on the periodic table?
I mean, I haven't done chemistry as well since my GCSE days, so I don't really have much of an opinion about it, I don't think.
An obvious weakness. I guess one thing I might say is that the periodic table is, as far as I can tell, nothing has changed a great deal. It's sort of large, rectangular, lots of boxes. There's probably a more exciting way of presenting that, whether that's through playing around with colors, through playing around with layout, whether you would do something clever with an app. But also the thing that always struck me about the periodic table is so much of it is filled up with the elements you're never going to have to worry about. All of the weird transition elements, all of the elements with ridiculous numbers, with ridiculous atomic numbers. You're never actually going to need to know anything about ananium or Einsteinium or nobelium. They never come up. So giving over some more space to the important ones like hydrogen and lithium would seem sensible to me. But as I say, I genuinely don't know. So hopefully I wouldn't end up in that interview. The sort of question I want to look at here was and we'll look at graphs in a moment, was the question around smoking. So the smoking one is fascinating to me because I'm in holiday in Cyprus at the moment. And one of the things that you notice going on holiday are the different things that different cultures and different legal regimes decide are important. So here in Cyprus, people smoke a lot more. Cigarettes are about a third of the price they are in the UK. And there are a lot more places you can smoke. But at the same time, it's really difficult to get any medicine. You can only get painkillers from a pharmacy. The pharmacies aren't always open. I spent an hour walking around trying to buy some painkillers earlier today. Not an ideal combination when you need painkillers and can't find them.
No.
And so one of the interesting things here when we talk about legality is that different countries around the world have all chosen different legal regimes around smoking. And so you might want to ask, what are obviously the health implications of smoking are more or less the same the world over, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's not that, I lived in China for a long time. It's not as though Chinese people are unusually resistant to lung cancer. They get lung cancer just as much as people from any other part of the world. So the health implications are more or less the same everywhere, but the legal decisions are different everywhere. So you might want to think about why it is that happens. Why is it that sort of this input leads to different outputs, but also to think about what things are relevant to the government in the UK. As I can tell, the main reason that smoking is one of the reasons that smoking is so expensive in the UK is to try and discourage people from doing it. And that is the noticeable difference with other countries. Mm-hmm. But something I've always wondered about is, how much money does the government make from smoking? And, is it fully in their interest to get rid of it? Because at £10 a packet, when I presume it costs all of 30 or 40p to produce this packet of cigarettes, because that's the kind of prices you see in other parts of the world, you could, and this is a very cheap joke, it occurs to me, you could make a very fun little joke about the real addict being the UK government being addicted to cigarette taxes rather than the smokers being addicted to cigarettes. Mm-hmm. I don't know, I thought maybe that's more fun than I thought. Depends if your interviewer is a smoker or not, which you're probably not going to know, because I would be even on Teams. And this is something funny I've noticed actually, working through the pandemic. I work with a lot of people who smoke, a lot of people who don't smoke. And one of the interesting things is, even at home on Zoom, people won't smoke at work. Even though, well, what's the problem? The smoke isn't going to come through the screen. Yeah. Why shouldn't they smoke while they're on a Zoom call with me? But no one's ever done it. The entrance of the office into the house has made it impossible to smoke at home in this strange way. Yeah. And which I find sort of darkly fascinating, that, even working from home, there are certain things that I do. Might not wear trousers to work, because no one can see that, but you couldn't smoke at work, even though you're at your house where you smoke anyway. Exactly.
It's just like you're still kind of keeping that office life still in the comfort of your own house.
Yes, it's the boss has invaded your house now. It's kind of frightening in its own way. The last thing I want to talk about were these kinds of graph question. So I pulled out here a graph I've chosen not to label, of something happening between 1950 and the present day-ish. Now the numbers are dates. The other set of numbers on the y-axis, though, money. In this case, this is GDP per capita. Mm-hmm. And you might, if you were in and this will go for a lot of data-driven subjects, you might well be given a graph that demonstrates something but has had some of the information removed, to see if you can figure out how the graph works without having the necessary contextual information to guide you. I don't know if you've looked through these slides. Do you know what this is a graph of?
No. I couldn't say that I know at all. No, I've been trying to figure it out, but no.
Now, well, what can you describe to me what's going on?
Well, clearly, especially with the blue line, it goes up quite high past kind of 1980s, and it just grows. Yeah, I have no idea what this could be about.
Yeah, so I'd say we're looking at time here, right? So we can see that in 1975 or so, something happens to the black line. Because up until that point, the lines they're all relatively flat. Something happens in 1975 there, and then something happens in around 1990 to the kind of grey line, which also starts to progress as well. Whereas nothing ever really improves the red line. In fact, it's in roughly the same place. Yeah, it's in roughly the same place 60 years later as before. So what I pulled out here are the GDP per capita, so in effect the wealth of three very similarly placed countries, the two Koreas and the People's Republic of China.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's interesting here to look at, you have three countries that are notionally working under similar economic systems up until the 70s. Two countries that are officially communist and another country that is under a kind of managed dictatorship.
Mm-hmm.
And you then see this interesting breaking apart of these lines. Because if you look at the information from 1950 to 1975, you would say that those are stuck together, right? That whatever it is they're doing, they're all going to carry on doing that.
Yeah.
And then something happens, and the interview question is, well, what? Particularly in the case of the Republic of Korea, South Korea, something happens there that, like, my God, if we can figure out what that is,
yeah,
imagine the human welfare.
Exactly. I was just thinking that.
If you can find a way to make people double their wealth every 10 years, we should, what could be a more important thing to know how it's done?
Mm-hmm.
And I think the related question here, particularly in the case of China, is, if you look at the space under the line, so to speak, so the wealth of people, it's not just that you're looking at, a really impressive increase from 1980s, 1990s onwards, but that's a lot of people. That is the best part of 1 billion people who are going from one standard of living to another standard. And this is something I saw a lot of while I was in China. You will meet people who are in their 60s and 70s who grew up, the far left end of that line in horrifying poverty, and now live quite pleasant middle-class lives.
Mm-hmm.
And so, it's not just about the politics and the graphs and how does this happen, but you also want to think about the human welfare that's at stake in these questions. If we can figure out how to, figuring out how to do that 1975, that 1990 movement, where you suddenly make people richer and
Mm-hmm.
do it in what appears to be at least a fairly sustainable way, you can figure out how to do that. What more could you want to learn at university?
Yeah.
So I wanted to finish, and we'll have time, I think, to take a few questions up until about 1:45, with a couple of tips from my own experience. So I interviewed at Oxford. Oh God, how long ago was that? 15 years ago. I look so young. And these are the takeaways that sort of I had from my own experience, and speaking to other people, I think are really valuable. That the first one is to make sure that you have read everything that you said you have read in your personal statement. If you said you have read A Brief History of Time by Stephen Hawking, if you've said you've read The Man Who Mistook His Wife for a Hat, if you've said you've read Great Expectations, do read it, even if you're reading it on the bus on your way to and from school in the week running up to the interview. Make sure you've read it, because there's nothing more embarrassing than during an interview. Yes. Imagine if you had based your whole personal statement on how much you loved Hamlet, and then in the interview, the guy goes, God, it's horrible that way he kills Polonius through the curtain. You go, oh God, he killed Polonius?
Oh no.
You don't want to make a fool of yourself by having lied in the personal statement. So if you've said something, make sure you have read it.
Mm-hmm.
If you have time, read it again. Because what you want to do is, where you have the depth of knowledge, really show it. Don't just, I love Hamlet, cool play. But, go into detail about the stuff that you know about the subject, really show off learning that you've done, really demonstrate the sort of the scale of it. Because the interesting thing to the interviewer isn't going to be how many books you've read, it's how much you learn from each of those books. It's something I encounter a lot in personal statements when I'm editing them. Someone will, they will talk about, say, Plato for one sentence. You look at it and go, that book is smarter than you, right? You can't just dismiss Plato in one sentence. That could quite easily be someone's entire life's work, the study of Plato. Show your depth, show that you're taking these things seriously. The worst thing you can do is sort of seem flippant, not taking the material seriously. It's natural that you'll panic in the interview. Take some time. If you're worried, if you need a break, grab some water, listen to that question. I'm going to have this can of Greek water. I'm going to stop, take that little prop, take the chance to rest, recuperate, figure out what I'm going to say next. If you need 10 seconds, that's fine. No one is going to kick you out of university for being a little bit slow off the mark. This isn't the 100 meters at the Olympics.
Yeah, and interviewers will know as well that obviously you'll be nervous, and they're completely understanding of that as well. So yeah,
that's a good point to remember, actually. This might be the only interview that you are doing at Cambridge, but your interviewer will be doing perhaps 10 or 15 of these today. So if you're worried, if you're nervous, if you're stressed, remember that they have done this a lot of times, that they know what they're doing, and that you not knowing what you're doing and being stressed, that's fine. Yeah. You're not supposed to be the experienced person in the room. They know what they're doing. They're not going to let you they're not going to let you crash and burn, because if that happens, they won't get to find out if you're a good student or not.
Exactly.
The other 2 points I wanted to cover, it is tempting, if you are panicking, to make things up. Don't do it. You are talking to specialists, they will know, or worse, they will ask you. If you say, oh, well, I know all about this particular thing that I've just made up, and they'll go, oh, that's fascinating, I know about that, can you tell me some more? And you'll just have to keep on going. And eventually it will become obvious that you are in fact making it up, and you look silly. In my interview at Oxford all those years ago, I panicked and I claimed I knew something about cloth in ancient Greece. I did not know anything about cloth in ancient Greece, but they were very interested to hear about what I did apparently know, because they thought it might be news that they were unaware of. And okay. I did look stupid because I was making it up. And that links into our last point. Remember why you're there. It's the easy thing in the world to get caught up in showing off and talking about how great you are and how smart you are and how you know everything. Now, if that's true, if you are super great and you know everything, you've no need to go to university. Don't bother. You're already super great and super smart. You shouldn't be applying for a place. You should be applying for a job.
Yeah.
The reason you're there is because you want to learn something, because the people you're talking to are smarter and more knowledgeable than you. Make sure that they know that. The reason you're going to university isn't to teach, it's to learn. And so come into it with the attitude of, an empty glass that wants to be filled up, not a full glass that wants someone to drink it.
Nicely put.
So that's sort of the breadth of what I wanted to talk about in terms of what it's going to be like, giving some guidance based on my experience, based on the experience of students we worked with. But we're able to offer some much more kind of focused and specialist support in this webinar, shocking as that may be. So if you wouldn't mind telling us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I'm not too sure how much research everyone's kind of done so far within UniAdmissions, but we help students in a lot of different situations, especially with the interviews coming around. I've spoken to my fair share in just the last week, if not today, kind of about what to expect on the interview and how we can help. But we are able to provide you with some experienced tutors, not just by those who have spoken to students before, but people who have been through the process. So it will be really good for you guys to have that firsthand kind of conversation with someone who's been through the exact same process you've been through, and who will know exactly what you will be going through. So we offer expert bespoke tuition. That being said, like one-to-one tuition and some mock interviews as well. And most of our tutors are either students or recent graduates from Oxbridge universities, and they would all be kind of around your specific subject, so they'll know exactly what you'll be going through as well. And we've helped students kind of prepare for interviews over a range of different subjects, just across the entire kind of like courses that you'd be able to learn.
Yeah, I don't. Every now and again, someone comes to us. We had a request for someone who needed. I'm trying to remember what it was. There was a request for someone who needed tuition. Was it Aramaic? There was something I'd never seen before that came through in the emails this week. Was it Aramaic? It was something. It was something very different. It was something I did not know. I'd like dimly heard of, but nothing better than that. To the best of my knowledge, there is no subject that we have never prepared someone for. We've worked with every subject, with students from all kinds of different backgrounds. We've had good results, I think, I think we've gotten for every subject at this point, and those where we haven't, it's been the one person.
Yeah.
But we do, we will cover everything, and if we can't find someone who aligns perfectly with your subject, we will keep trying. I mean, it's a network of over 2,500, maybe 3,000 we work with.
Yeah.
So if we can't find someone to help, that's on us, because
No.
Right, I'm just flicking my video off because the internet does not seem happy with me. This is the beauty of being away from home. We also appreciate that, given the sort of the short timescales people are working to. I've seen in the chat someone has their Cambridge interview coming up in 5 days, which is very exciting. One thing we really emphasize is making sure that each student gets really quick, immediate feedback. Do you want to talk to us a little bit about that?
Yeah. So with the mock interviews that you'll be kind of attending, the first half hour of the interview would be kind of you answering the questions and just having that discussion with the tutor. The second half will be going over kind of feedbacks and ways that you'll be able to improve moving forward. So this is one of the reports that will happen. So at the end of each one of your sessions with the tutor or mock interview, they'll write you a report, which will be then sent to your main tutor. But it basically breaks down everything you covered during that session. So the questions you were asked, but also goes over things that you may need to improve on. So one of the questions, for example, the motivation for medicine, you may have answered it quite well, but then you may just need to have kind of added in your own experiences or your own personal kind of background around the NHS or just around medicine in general. So that's something that they will then write down and then will be forwarded to your main tutor, who, with any remaining sessions you may have, will be kind of used to go over any improvements. So for your next mock interview, you would have hopefully improved significantly. If not, at least just that 10%, knowing that you can further on improve.
Thank you. The other thing I wanted to say about these is we make sure to share them with parent and student as well.
Yes.
By the look of it, I mean, even I am too young to have a teenage son or daughter, despite my wife and I's best efforts. And I know that young people are not always the best at communicating with their parents. Mm-hmm. And so we make sure that all this information is provided to the parent promptly as well, so that they can continue to support the student. I know when I was this age, if you had asked me how my mock interview had went, I would simply have answered fine and stormed off. I was a very difficult teenager. Probably demonstrated the lack of soft skills. That is why I didn't get into Oxford. But you can't have everything in life. So just to round off, we're really proud with the rates of success that we have with our students. Last year, over 6% of the students we worked with were fortunate enough to get offers. We're really proud that our support is able to have a scale of an impact. and it compares really well with even the most prestigious schools in the country in terms of the number of people we're able to get into Oxford, as is demonstrated here. As I like to say, we are at least as good at Eton College as getting people in Oxford, as being cheaper, although we don't have the funny outfits, which is a source of disappointment to me. I would love to dress up in the funny outfits, and I mean, goodness, can you imagine what Rohan would look like dressed like that every day?
I mean, he comes into work with like shorts sometimes, so seeing him in anything else is just, it's going to be very strange.
Yeah, I think forcing him into white tie every day would be marvelous.
Oh God, yeah.
It's something I'll suggest. But if it'll help with the success rates, I think we should push for it. You can read nice things about the company on TripAdvisor. TripAdvisor? No, this is Trustpilot.
Yeah.
You can tell I'm on holiday. If you've enjoyed this webinar, please do mention there. It's obviously very flattering for me and for everyone else who contributes to these to have nice things said about us online. So please do that if you chance. And that's also a chance to read about the services we provide. We're very proud of what we do, and so please do look at those. Less proud. I'm very much not proud of Will and Rohan's podcast. They have yet to invite me to appear on their podcast. I'm furious. I know.
What would you talk about?
What wouldn't I talk about? They still, well, I would tell them about what I did on my holiday. They still won't let me go on their podcast. I hear it's good, but obviously without me, it must be rubbish. Please do let me know if it's any good and if I can improve it. I've always wanted to be on a podcast, and they still will not let me.
No.
I'm very upset. The last thing is to say that if you've enjoyed hearing from me today, hearing from Saloma, my colleague, please do get in touch with us. You can continue to speak to us for longer by booking a consultation, and this is how we will set you up with the kind of work we can do with you to support your application. Given that timescales are very short, we have people available today, we have people available tomorrow to speak with you, to figure out how we can best support you. So please do get in touch, as soon as possibly can, so that we can help you as much as we possibly can. One person mentioned in the chat that they have an interview coming up in 5 days. That is more than enough time for us to squeeze 2 or 3 mock interviews in for you to really feel prepared. To share with you some of the resources we have about getting things ready for these online interviews. The most important thing is when you come to do that real interview, if it's the first time you've done it, that's fine. It might go okay. If it's the 4th time, the 5th time, the 7th time, you're going to feel so much more relaxed, so much more prepared, and even only 1 or 2 extra sessions, 1 or 2 bits of practice you get in between now and then, it can make a real difference in terms of panic. I think back to my own experience. Would I have made up something about cloth if I'd had more practice? I don't know. I like to think I wouldn't have done, and my life would be entirely different. I would have got into Oxford that first time. On the bright side, I didn't go to Oxford, I went to Cambridge instead. So, it wasn't the end of the world, but it would have been nice.
Yeah.
So we're going to turn now to the to questions. So I can see a few dropping in already. So fab. We have a question from simply LE. She asks about interview courses for medicine. When do these start, and what kind of stuff do we do? What kind of stuff do we have available for medicine?
So in terms of when to start, we can start as soon as you kind of book in a consultation. Either myself or one of my colleagues will be in contact with you just to speak to you a little bit more about how we can help. But to kind of summarize it, we'll be able to provide you with the one-to-one tuition with our Oxbridge experts, first of all. And this will include some mock interviews as well. So we always recommend a minimum of at least 4, just to put you in the best position of just building up that confidence and also that experience as well. And we also would be able to kind of offer some resources and materials on our portal And we actually have some intensive courses, which are weekend courses. So there are additional 10 hours where you have some more tutorials during the day, as well as some mock interviews in the evening as well. The best thing about these ones is you'll be able to witness other students one as well. So you can see how they are doing, and how you could potentially either maybe adopt some of their styles, or just things that they may not be doing so well on, you can always just try to improve on. If it is something you are interested on, definitely book in a consultation for either today or tomorrow. I might be the one who's speaking to you, if anything.
Yeah, sadly, I won't be available until for a little while, because I said I'm on holiday. So we've got a few questions coming in. Jonathan George asks, will they ask you why you chose your college? This is one of those questions that's sort of gone out of fashion, but it is a good idea to have answered the question, even if you don't know, even if it isn't the world's best answer. What I would suggest is start by reading the Wikipedia page about the college that you're applying to, and see if you can figure out from there why it is a good match for you. It may be that the answer you come up with is not the world's most interesting answer, but I'd say the thing to remember about colleges is they are like sports teams. In the end, everyone likes theirs and thinks all of the others are rubbish, almost regardless of which one they end up with. So it could be as simple as saying, you know, I wanted to come here because I heard the food was good. I liked to look at the buildings. I heard I had ducks. You know, it doesn't need to be the world's most serious thing. If they are asking you why you chose the college in your interview, probably it's going to be just as a question to warm you up, to start the conversation going, to ask you something nice and easy. And if you've had a wander around the place and you've seen something you like, you know, that'll do. You don't need to worry too much about having a fantastic reason. And, you know, some of the better research reasons might come across a little weird. You know, if you want to go to the college because you are obsessed with someone who went there in the Victorian era, may not be the best answer either. You know, don't explain that you want to go to Oxford because your plan is to dress up as Oscar Wilde every day. That may not give the best impression. I'm just having a look. We've got a few other questions. We've got a few questions about, so Pierre asks E&M, Economics and Management. Economics and Management is a very competitive course. You've correctly identified, Pierre. The good news is if you've got to the interview stage, that does mean that most of that competitiveness is now over. Oxford will interview roughly the same number of students per place for every subject, regardless of how many people apply. So if you have got an interview for E&M, you're already in the top % of people who applied, which is already an achievement on its own. So well done. In terms of demonstrating skills, you know, think about the areas that other people aren't necessarily going to have spent as much time on. If you think people are going to have over-focused on the kind of fun parts of economics and not enough on the maths, then, you know, put a little bit more time there. If you're thinking about the management side of it, in management is a tricky one for someone who is only 17 or 18, because probably you haven't done very much managing. It will be unusual. So think about what your kind of style of management is, what kinds of ideas about working with other people you have, what examples you have to draw on. You know, think about what you can present in that interview that is going to be different from the next person. You know, whether that's by being better or whether it's by having a different, more imaginative kind of answer, being a little bit different. There we go. Yeah, and there's a question I think from Pierre about the sort of the detail of the E&M interview. This is an area where it's really helpful. We've had a couple of other questions that are subject specific. This is a really good chance to speak to us directly through the consultation, for the simple reason that I'm doing this from one small laptop. I'm not able to open up all of the resources, all of the PowerPoints, all of the Excel that I would like to at this point. And so some of these questions I simply can't answer without doing some research. And the beauty of the consultation is it does give us the time to go away and do that for you. So if you have any questions that have, essentially, if there's more than one point of detail, please do get in touch through a consultation, because I'm not going to be able to answer them because I don't have enough time to think about them. Fab. Vidun asks, will there be 2 online interviews at Cambridge or only 1? And will this be on the same day? So my understanding is there'll be 2 online interviews. 2, yeah. My understanding is also they are not going to be on the same day, but this will probably vary. This is just going to be a case of how the universities table things. Bear in mind that they are moving around a lot of people, a lot of computer screens, just a lot of logistical challenges. So exactly how things are going to be run probably will vary from day to day, from subject to subject, regardless. It be the person who has planned to interview you, I don't know, has to go and do something else, and someone has to fill in, and then things get moved around. It's a living being, the whole experience. But I believe it's at least 2 online interviews. That's our understanding. Yeah. Lovely. We've had a couple of queries about cost. Are you able to talk about that a little bit, Salema?
Yeah, so we can't actually say exactly what kind of cost you'll be expecting, because what we tend to do is have a bit of within the consultation, we speak to you a little bit about what you've done so far and how we can help you moving forward. And then from there, we'll be able to kind of create a more bespoke program for you. And then we'll be able to know more about the investment and the cost of the program.
Yeah, and this is particularly important at this late stage in the process. If we were, if you were talking about applying, oh God, I'm starting to look a bit creepy, aren't I, with this lighting? If we were talking about applications for next, we were thinking about an interview that was going to be in 12 months' time. Things would be a little simpler. We'd be thinking about a more straightforwardly structured package, about working with you, every week for the next 52 weeks. That would make things like pricing and like packaging design much clearer. If we're going to be working with you for 1, maybe 2 weeks, then figuring out what is the right fit for you, what time you have, what availability we can find for tutors. Exactly. All of those things make it a lot more complicated.
Yes.
And so we don't want to suggest we can provide more support than we can. We don't want to suggest that we can only do X amount when in fact we can do 4X. It's a little bit of a tricky one, because it's all about that last sprint at this point. And so we want to make sure that we're giving you the right answer. Unfortunately, that isn't something that we can just package out.
Yeah.
Victoria asks about the impact of the admissions test at the interview stage. This is an excellent question that I've not actually looked into in detail yet. I don't know. What I will do, Victoria, is I will look into it. Perhaps there'll be a blog post in the next couple of weeks once I've found out the answer. But it would require doing a slightly fiddly R-squared regression. But because you're working with different caliber levels, I'm not sure we'll come out with a sensible answer, because we don't know about interview scoring in the same level of granularity we do about admissions test scoring. I am curious, because it's a question that I hadn't really thought about, but I agree is relevant. I will get back to you. I have run the regression. I'll probably do it for an easy subject like English first, just because it's a single variable on the test. But it's a good question, and we'll find out. So yeah, watch out for that on the blog, or yeah, book in a consultation. Hopefully we'll have an answer for you eventually. But I don't know. But it's an excellent question, because yeah, it will be a really helpful thing to know. I think that is all we have in terms of questions. There are a couple we haven't been able to cover, but these are, as we mentioned earlier, those that are a little bit too specialist, that we've only been able to really answer in the context of having a conversation with you to figure out your needs. Oh yeah, I am looking creepy. That's that's very front lit, isn't it?
Yeah.
No, I'm 5 weeks too late for that. So I think we'll leave it there. There have been a couple of questions about recordings. A recording of this will be sent out sometime next week. It normally takes a couple of days because we have to tidy these things up in terms of the file. And we will work forward from there. But have a lovely weekend, everyone. What little bit of it there is left. Thank you so much for joining me, Salema. And have a great week. And for those of you who have interviews coming up, very best of luck. I hope it goes to plan for you. At the very least, it'll be a fun experience and it's something to cherish. Getting the interview at all is already a huge achievement. The place is just cherry on that cake. So do really be proud of what you've already accomplished. And have a lovely weekend, everyone. Thank you.
Bye, guys.